Alright guys, we are back. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. As always, it is so great to see you. And friends, welcome to episode 244 of Photography Talk Success Interview. And today's success story is coming from all the way from Canada. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, Rob Moroto. Rob, what do you say? You ready to get this going?
Let's do it, man. Let's get going.
Alright. Now friends, Rob has been a professional photographer for over 11 years with heavy focus on real estate photography. Now Rob, I've given our listeners just a taste of what you and I are going to be talking about. Before we dive into these questions, can you take a moment, share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I try and do a lot of different businesses, and I fail at most of them. Seems like photography is the only one that I've actually been able to keep going consistently, so I'm sticking with this. I've got I live half-time in the prairies and half-time on the island here, and I've got 3 kids, a beautiful wife, and what more can you ask for, really?
Fantastic. Well, Rob, we're going to jump into your journey as a photographer. To get that ball going, I have to ask you, what has you most excited about the photography industry today?
Honestly, it is how quickly things are changing in the photography industry. Like, the gear is changing so quickly. The technology is changing. Even like the introduction of the new Mac M1 processor. That's amazing. Everything that we could do up till now, been fantastic. And I thought we were going gangbusters, super fast in terms of technology with up till now. But I see the future going exponentially faster. And I'm excited to see what we can do next.
So I can assume that you're a Mac user?
I am. I'm definitely a Mac user.
Have you jumped on one of the M1, the silicon-powered machines yet?
Not yet, but I'm waiting because I heard that they're trying to do a 32-core MacBook Pro, which, I don't know. Saving up for that one.
I'm right with you as well on that. It was tempting when you see some of the reviews that have come out on they have on the mini as well as the 13-inch MacBook Pro. And while it's tempting, I'm holding out myself for that 16-inch. And yeah, I've heard some of the rumors as well. It looks pretty badass. All right, my friend, you and I are going to do something fun here, and we're going to jump into the Wayback Machine, and we're going to start off. Do you happen to remember what was the original inspiration way back in the day for getting involved in photography?
It's funny. It's a little bit of a sad story. I grew up with my dad passed away when I was really young, and because of that, the only thing I really had were photos. And so I was one of those kids that every trip we went on, I'd take a camera and take photos because that's all that's left afterwards. And so when after my dad passed away, I went through all of our photo albums to try and find him because I couldn't really remember him. And it's because of those photos that I actually have some memories. And I think that's what really got me into it, where you start seeing the importance of what photography, how important photography can be to keep those memories alive.
Indeed. And if you would, can you tell us about the first photo that you took that validated your interest in photography?
I can talk about it. I don't even know where it is. It goes way back to I would say we were 14 when we took a class trip out to France, and back in the film days. We all got our pictures developed, and then what we would do is we'd all get back together, lay out all the photos that we got, and then everyone would write on the back of each of the photos their names if they wanted a copy of that photo. And it really happened where I was the only one where everyone wrote their names on the back of all of my photos. And there was one in particular where everyone's just like, yeah, we got to have copies of that. And I think that sort of got me to the point where I started thinking, okay, well, you know what? I might actually know what the hell I'm doing with this stuff.
Speaking of which, while we're talking about your past, when you first got started, what was the biggest challenge that you faced with photography? And Rob, how did you overcome from that?
The biggest, it was I didn't know what I was doing. And I think everybody's like that. Nobody knows really what they're doing. Like you hear of guys that still text or email me and they're like, hey, what shutter speed do you use? I'm like, really? That's your question? You got much bigger issues than that. But I was that guy. I was that guy that didn't know what shutter speed to use to get these great photos. So what really helped me was there was a guy that came up to me and he's like, hey, Robbie, if you really want, I'm going to show you the ropes. I'll show you how to do this. And that was it. And at the very beginning, I was hesitant to take advice from somebody. And because I thought, well, hell, I can learn this. I went through university. I know how to self-study. I can teach myself. And it was getting over my own ego and letting somebody help me. And for me learning to shut up, that really pushed me forward.
And speaking of which, before we kind of fast forward in today, do you happen to remember what your first camera was?
You know what? Funny thing that you should ask, I actually have it right here. And sorry, actually, I don't have my first camera. My first camera was one of the, you remember those ones where it took, God, what was it? I can't remember the type of film it was. It came looking like the 2 rolls and a
the 110?
plastic. Yeah.
It's like a thin camera like this, right? Yeah, dude, I think it was the 110. Yeah, I'm near certain that's 110.
That was the first camera I had. But no, I want to show you the first DSLR, or not DSLR, SLR that I had. And this is one where if anyone else recognizes this or knows what it is, I'd be really impressed. Because this, you see that? There. That is where the film went in. And if you don't know how you can get film into that, well, let me tell you. This is an APS Advantix SLR, the only one that Canon made. And quite frankly, I'm probably the only sucker that bought one of these things.
Wow, so that has got to be 90s?
God, late 90s? Yeah, I think so. Late 90s, early 2000s.
Leave a comment below if you have that camera. Wow, so let's fast forward a little bit, Rob. What do you enjoy photographing the most?
You know what? Honestly, it's stuff that has meaning. And of course, you can always look at it and say there's meaning in almost anything that you can do. You can find meaning in anything. But realistically, I like finding meaning in things like, for example, like I just shot my best friend's wedding. And with COVID, there's no way that we could actually have a huge wedding. And so what we did was we actually set it up. I got my cameras out. We live streamed the entire event on a Zoom call, invited 100 people to the Zoom call, got that all going. I was the only one that was invited. So it's the bride, the groom, their kids, me, shooting away. And that was meaningful because they actually got their wedding done. Or, another buddy of mine opened up a hotel. And he's like, hey, I just need some great shots to get this going. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Or even recently, I had a client of mine, and her father passed away. And I shot their wedding. And so they asked if I could take one of the photos that I did of them, take the dad out of a composite, and make I hate to say it, a funeral-ready photo or portrait. And we were able to do that. And these are the things that are meaningful in life. And so, yes, doing the real estate stuff is great, but it gives me practice to do the things that are really meaningful when I need it.
Great answer. Rob, tell us something about your photography that most people don't know about.
It's the one secret that I have is that I shoot more than anybody else. And so if you ever buy a used camera off of me, I'm sorry. The shutter count is going to be ridiculously high. And the reason for that is I look at photography differently. I look at it like cooking. I look at it like getting the ingredients to make your meal. And so I shoot a crap ton of photos. And then I merge, I Photoshop, I compose images after the fact in Photoshop and make them look the way that I envision the image to look. And so a lot of people ask me, they're like, hey, so what lens did you use? How did you get that shot? And really, it's not one shot. It's hundreds of shots. And it just looks like it's a natural shot.
What has been your proudest moment as a photographer?
It's a good question. I think Proud's an interesting one because I give myself little pats on the back fairly regularly, where you figure out a problem that you just solved, and you're like, oh, well, that makes my workflow a lot easier. I can now teach this to my guys and make their workflows a lot easier. Or, oh, I just figured out what this solution is. I can tell this to somebody else. And it's every time you find out how to do something a little better or figure out what the solution is to a problem that you have that, I give myself a little pat on the back. But I think the proudest moment was when we first started doing the real estate stuff, where we actually developed our entire process so that we can shoot almost anything. But with this process that I've developed, we can make anything look like anything that we want. We can take a daytime photo and make it look like it's twilight. We can make a twilight one, make it look like daytime. We can do almost anything with this process. And when I built that was when I was able to build my entire company, because I could replicate it now.
Okay, we've spoken about Proudest Moment, so now I'm going to jump on the other side of the fence. Tell us about a time, if you would, in your photographic journey where, Rob, you failed at something, and take us to ground level. What's going through your head at the time, and more importantly, how did you get up and how did you pivot from that moment?
That's a good one. I've always been afraid of failure. And so a lot of what I do is I will mitigate any opportunity to fail. So for example, for me, it's real estate. My camera dies, I screw up, whatever. I can go back the next day, right, and redo it. And that's sort of been the safe zone for me. And so, I've really never gone into doing a lot of weddings or anything that is just in the moment, only then and there. And so I've safeguarded myself from a lot of that. And luckily, I haven't had many failures on the job. But I gotta say that my biggest failures were more people related, where I've, because of my ego, because of who I was and who I thought I was and what I thought I was entitled to, I haven't always been the kindest person to people. And that's my biggest failure. And so and that happens when you get stressed and when you get really busy and bogged down, and you start lashing out at others. And that's I would say my biggest failures up till now. And to get past that is just to say to myself, hey dude, don't be a douchebag today. I've been working on that.
Rob, I've done a lot of these interviews over the years, and I have to say that is probably one of the most unique answers that you can really, the viewers here can sit down, pause, go back, and there's a lot of meat to pull out of that, a lot of meat and a lot of depth to really think about and process. Very strong answer. And speaking of a failure, we all have weaknesses. What is yours relating to photography?
Honestly, it's we get technical. Lighting, portrait lighting is still one of my weaker points, and I think the reason I haven't done a lot of that was because I've never wanted to work with people, because I was always afraid to fail on that. So yes, that's one of my weaker points. And posing people, and posing people is tough. I never realized how tough that is.
Brother, you are not alone on that one. Now, Rob, finding the time to get out and shoot is another challenge for many. How do you find the time in your very busy schedule to get out there and have quote-unquote Rob time with your camera?
It's interesting. I've put that aside for a while, and I really haven't gone out and done that. And especially this year with COVID, it's been impossible to get out and do anything. But for me, the things that I like shooting the most are the things that I care about. So I love going on hikes with my wife and kids, and we'll go up to these beautiful waterfalls, and the kids will just be fishing in the waterfall, and I'll take pictures of them. And that's stuff that makes me feel happy, because I get to take that, share that out with the rest of the family. Grandparents are all happy. They're wanting prints. I don't know why they always want prints. But that's the stuff that makes me. That's my photography right now. It is me taking photos of the kids. And, I'm sure that one day when they go off to university, then I'll be out shooting places out in Iceland or maybe even Banff or down in California. I don't know. But until then, it's just mostly my kids. I love shooting.
All right. Nailing composition right can be a challenge for a lot of folks. What do you think is the trick to mastering composition?
That's a good one. That's a good one. With my staff, I always say, let's go out, look at all the photos that you can on Instagram, anywhere, to see what great composition is. And then when you analyze it, start looking at it from the edges, not from the center, but from the edges. And start seeing how they frame from the outside inward. Because with architecture, it's a lot different than when you do it with portraits or product. Because yes, whatever's in the middle of it makes sense, but it's whatever you use on the edges to frame it that really make a great composition.
Rob, there are many photographers out there who are starting out who just don't have the money to buy the camera gear that they want. What advice can you give to them?
That's a really good question. And I say this all the time. If you're focused on getting gear, go and focus on your lenses. Get the best lenses that you can afford. And with the camera body, don't worry. That's technology. It keeps on recycling all the time. So go and invest in the lenses. Because if you buy, and always buy used. Because if you buy, say, $1,000 used lens, likely you're going to be able to sell that for $1,000 in 2 years. So there's really no monetary output on your part if you think about it that way. The second thing is always look at what the knockoff versions are of your gear. And so for us, for example, we use completely Canon gear, but with our flashes, we've been using Godox because a Godox flash costs about the same as what it used to cost us to get our 600 series speed lights fixed from Canon. So we can actually replace an entire flash for the same cost that it used to cost us just to fix them. So knockoffs are great like that.
How do you feel photography has impacted the way that you see the world?
It's interesting. Photography's always been a way for me to try and show what I see the world as. But then you're absolutely right. Photography's actually shown me what the world actually is. And because I run the photography business, I see all sorts of people and how they interact and how they are with, getting invoices and getting product. And working with my staff, I see how they are reacting to people. And what photography's taught me is that really, life is not that difficult. Like I keep on saying to my staff, it's just real estate. Calm down, we can fix it, and everything will be all right. And I've started to take that philosophy towards almost everything in life, because really, it is just something. It's never anything that's completely overwhelming and life-threatening and all that. It's just that, right? And so it's calmed me down quite a bit.
What do you see photographers doing today that, if done differently tomorrow, would ultimately improve their success?
I think photographers need to laugh more and just smile more and be happier. And it's unfortunate. I think it's these times where everyone's being so competitive and so run down and so stressed out that they forget that it needs to be fun. And your clients see that. And the biggest mistake that I see a lot of photographers do is they forget that photography is a service industry. We are here to service somebody else. How we act and how we present ourselves is part of that service. And so it's like a restaurant, right? It doesn't matter how good the food is. If your server is a dick, you're not going to like that restaurant. And same with photography. You as a photographer are part of that process. So I think if a lot of photographers, they just stop and smile more.
Rob, I said this earlier about one of your earlier answers, and I'm going to repeat it again. This is just one of those very unique answers. I personally find it is where others are zigging, you're zagging, and that is a good thing with this answer here because it's something different. There's contrast with the answer that you've given, and it's one of those answers that it was just a few days ago I was talking to another photographer about. A lot of photographers are very serious about what they do, and in hearing you talk about smile, laugh a little bit more. I'm a big goofball, so your answer really resonates with me. To get your creative eye going and focus, rather, where do you draw your inspiration from?
For work, it's interesting. I used to be so focused on getting a job done, getting the invoice out, and getting paid, and it was financially motivated. Lately, it's changed so that I've changed my focus. I've changed it so that it's like, well, what am I doing? And when you change that and you say, well, what am I doing? What's the overall goal of this? Like, what part of this puzzle am I in? And you realize, like, oh, I'm the photographer. I'm creating the media, which then they're going to use to promote their product, and then they're going to sell things and to people who are really going to need it, and whoever buys it is going to be really happy. Okay, if you think of yourself in that life cycle, then you start realizing it's like, I want to do a good job so that, somewhere down the road, somebody is able to really buy and appreciate the product that I'm shooting. And that's how I've changed how I motivate myself, because I want to make it so that we do get to that point where we actually have somebody who buys something and they're really happy with it afterwards, or has a really good memory of something afterward.
What is your best photography related tip?
Oh, always take more photos than you think you need. Always. And carry more memory cards than you ever think you'll need.
Great answer. Seeing a little continuity with some of your earlier answers as well. Rob, I've seen a lot of your work. Your photos look absolutely amazing. What is your secret sauce when it comes to post-processing?
That's a good question, and it's one that I've been starting to teach to a lot of people, and we're putting together a course for that. But quite frankly, what it is we take more photos than we need. And everything is almost a composite rather than a single photo. And knowing how to take the right images for the composite is the key to creating the best overall shot. Just like cooking, right? You got to get the right ingredients to be able to make that dish. But it's not just one ingredient that's going to make it all.
Kind of speaking of this side of it here, what does your post-processing workflow look like? We
start off taking all of our raw files, throwing it into Bridge, figuring out what we need, sorting it appropriately, throw them into Photomatix, and then we got a whole bunch of other little processes in between. We throw it into Lightroom, we edit in Photoshop, we export from Lightroom, and then for delivery, we typically use Dropbox. And that's about it. A lot of steps in between, but...
All right, Rob. What would you like for people to take away from your photos?
It's interesting. Like, because most of the photography that I do is just commercial photography. It's mostly just architecture. There's really no large takeaways other than buy that product. However, there are certain pieces that I do put out there that are more artistic, and for those I do try and write stories on what the meaning of the photos are. And right now I've got a website that has all that on there. However, I am taking it down because it needs to be revamped. But if you're watching this in the meantime, before it gets taken down, it's at www.moroto.ca, and you can take a look at some of the images there. But if it's down, then sorry, I'll get around to it when I can.
All right, Rob, it's that time of the interview. We're going to go through some burst questions. Now, of course, these are quick questions, and you're going to give me quick answers. Ready to go?
Okay.
What are 3 must-have items in your camera bag?
The 3 must-haves. Okay. For me, I need to have Benadryl, and because you never know what you're getting into. Strange enough, breath mints, and a cleaning kit. because my sensors are always getting covered.
What is the strangest thing in your camera bag?
The strangest, honestly, I gotta say, it's this. It's my mother actually gave it to me. It is Asian oil absorbing paper, and so it gets that oily sheen off of people's faces. And yeah, that's it. It is. Everyone's like, "Well, why do you have that tissue paper in there?" It's like, no, it's not. It's for taking the oil off your nose before you take your photo.
What is the last photography book or magazine that you've read?
The last, it's a book that I got from my sister-in-law called Dear Photograph, and it's a fantastic book about people recreating photographs of their childhood nowadays. And they have a picture of the photograph and them and recreating it. And it's a fantastic book because going back to what we were talking about before, meaning. It talks about how meaningful that photo was and then trying to recreate it and reliving those memories.
Which photographer, living or dead, do you admire the most?
This is a tough one for me. His name is John Sharp. And remember how I was telling you before about how I got into photography and how I made it? Well, he was a photographer that pulled me along and got me into photography. And unfortunately, he's also that person that I said that I wasn't a very good person to before and that I cut ties with. And then he passed away before we could actually make amends. And that's been one of my biggest regrets. But I have a lot of respect for him because his photography was fantastic. But not only that, he, through all his challenges and all my challenges and all the challenges of our relationship, he was always there for me to motivate me, to keep me going, and to always be a person who I could go to for answers. And I miss him dearly. But yes, he is the one that I would attribute a lot of my. I wouldn't be here at all if it wasn't for him. So yes, John Sharp. And thank you very much, Sean.
Final question, and Rob, it's a fun one. Life has been found on another planet, and none other than Sir Richard Branson is piloting the Virgin Galactic. He's put together a team of engineers, scientists, and doctors, and hey, guess what? He's asked you to come along to document the journey. Now, Rob, the challenge is you can only bring one camera, 2 lenses, and 2 other items. What would that be?
So, camera system, hands down, it would be the Fuji system, and probably depending on when this happens, it's either going to be the XT4 or the XT5 if it comes out or wherever that is. Lenses, I would have to say that I'd probably going for a 10-20 so that I could shoot inside the craft. I don't think it's going to be that big. And then likely I'm going to be shooting with a 100-400 that they have. And hopefully I don't have to skip too much in the middle there. As for personal items, I'm going to say I just picked up my first iPad a little while ago, the iPad Air, and I'm absolutely in love with it because I'm having so much fun drawing with that thing. So I would take that, and aside from that, probably a Rubik's Cube.
Interesting. Okay, very good. I just remember back in the day, I never had the patience. I would just shuffle around the stickers. Rob, my friend, what an amazing journey you've had. Now, before we part ways, can you share with our listeners one final piece of advice and also where they can find you on the web? Then we'll say goodbye.
Of course. You know what? The only piece of advice that I have for a lot of photographers is... Actually, you know what? I'll give you one piece of advice I give to all architectural photographers, and that is step back, zoom in. And that is the key to a lot of success for architectural and real estate photographers. And for where to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Rob Moroto, and you can find me on Facebook at... just look me up, Rob Moroto. And then online, you can find my personal stuff at moroto.ca or my commercial stuff at robmoroto.com.
Step back, zoom in, love it. All you photography talks, there you go. I told you this was going to be an amazing interview, and Rob brought it. you want to learn more about Rob, check out the links below. I'm going to have everything down there as well. Rob, thank you very much for your generous time. Photography Talk thanks you. My friend, we're going to see you next time.
Thank you, and have a great day.